Today, we're going to unravel one of the most perplexing economic stories of our time. It's about how Ireland became one of the world's richest countries, and, well, why that entire success story might just be a total illusion.
And it all starts with this number right here, 25%. In a single year, 2015, the Irish economy supposedly grew by a quarter. No, that's not a typo. That's the kind of growth a country would be lucky to see in an entire decade, crammed into just 12 months. It's insane.
I mean, let's just put that number into perspective for a second. While Ireland was posting 25%, you had economic powerhouses like India growing at 8% and China at 7%. The entire global economy that year grew by just over 3%. So what on earth was happening on that small island to make it an outlier of this magnitude?
On paper, this was just the exclamation point on an incredible 30-year run. Ireland went from being a net recipient of EU subsidies, getting help, to being a major contributor. Its GDP per capita soared past that of the United States, and for the first time in its modern history, more skilled workers were moving to Ireland than were leaving it. They called it the Celtic Tiger.
But here's the twist, the catch. While all those numbers are technically correct, the story they tell, it's a mirage. And understanding that illusion is the absolute key to understanding the strange, almost broken economics of modern Ireland.
So let's start at the beginning. How did this so-called miracle even get started?
The story really kicks into gear back in 1980, when a little company called Apple set up its first manufacturing plant there. That move, combined with a crucial and kind of obscure change in U.S. tax law in '96, really set the stage for everything that followed, including those high-profile Senate hearings and, you guessed it, that unbelievable 25% growth spike.
Now, the official story from Apple is that they saw a community rich with talent. But, the timing tells a slightly different story. Back then, Ireland was offering a decade of generous tax breaks for foreign manufacturers, but, and this is key, those incentives were set to be phased out in 1981. Apple snuck in right at the 11th hour, locking in a full decade of those sweet, sweet tax breaks.
And this really shows you just how desperate both sides were. You had Apple losing billions and staring bankruptcy in the face. And you had Ireland struggling with massive unemployment. So they struck a deal, a real symbiotic one. Apple would funnel its global revenue through Ireland, and in return, Ireland accepted a tax rate below 2% and literally rewrote parts of its tax code to make it all perfectly legal.
So, how does this deal actually work? And how in the world did it manage to create a global economic illusion?
The secret ingredient here is something called intellectual property, or IP. Think of a logo or a patent for a piece of software. It's incredibly valuable, right? But what's it worth? Its price is totally subjective, and that ambiguity, that's what makes IP the perfect tool for moving profits across borders without ever shipping a physical thing.
And this led to a tax scheme with a truly ridiculous name, the double Irish with a Dutch sandwich. Sounds tasty, right? Here's the simple version. You sell an iPhone in high-tax Germany. That German profit is then disguised as a royalty payment and sent to an Irish company. From there, it gets bounced through a couple of shell companies until it lands in a zero-tax haven like Bermuda. And poof, the profit vanishes from where it was earned and reappears untaxed on a Caribbean island.
Now, here's the crucial part. When international pressure finally forced Ireland to close this loophole, all that IP, all that digital value, had to go somewhere. So companies simply moved it onshore. An estimated $270 billion in assets were transferred onto Ireland's books in a single year. And because that IP legally counts towards GDP, the national economy appeared to explode by 25% overnight.
I mean, this tax strategy was the engine, the very thing that reshaped the entire Irish economy.
But this brings us to the core question, right? Is all this wealth real, or is it just a statistical mirage? Let's weigh the costs and the benefits. So on the one hand, the critics point to very real costs. The huge influx of corporate money contributed to a massive housing crisis. The economy is now dangerously dependent on just a handful of American tech giants. But on the other hand, proponents point to equally real benefits. These companies employ 10% of the workforce, a huge number, which helps solve an unemployment crisis. And Ireland now has genuine advantages, like a skilled English-speaking workforce right inside the EU.
But nothing, and I mean nothing, reveals the truth of this bizarre situation more than what happened in 2016. After a huge investigation, the European Union concluded Ireland had given Apple illegal state aid, and they ordered Apple to pay back $14 billion in taxes to Ireland.
So how do you think the Irish government reacted? This was a massive windfall, literally enough money to pay for the country's entire health service for a whole year. What would you do? Take the money and run, right?
They reacted with outrage. The Irish government immediately appealed the decision, fighting tooth and nail to avoid receiving $14 billion from Apple. It makes absolutely no sense until you realize what was really at stake.
And that brings us to Ireland's most valuable product. And let me tell you, it's not software and it's not pharmaceuticals. It's something else entirely.
Remember, when Tim Cook was getting grilled by the U.S. Senate, he was very proud to state that Apple does not hold money on a Caribbean island. And you know what? He was telling the truth. That's the whole point.
So if it's not just about having the absolute rock-bottom lowest taxes, because there are cheaper tax havens out there, what is it that Ireland is actually selling to these giant corporations? What's the product?
The answer is one word: reputation. What Ireland sells is the ultra-low tax rate of a Caribbean island, but with the legitimacy and the respectable image of a modern European country.
And this creates a really powerful feedback loop, this cycle of legitimacy. The real economy, with actual jobs and real factories, creates a legitimate image. Big companies who care about their image use that legitimacy as a reputable tax shelter. Their presence then inflates the economic stats, which creates the miracle, which in turn is used as proof that the business-friendly policies work. You see, the real and the fake parts of the economy, they can't exist without each other.
So what does this all mean? The story of the Celtic Tiger really forces us to ask a much bigger question. If a nation's most valuable export can be something as intangible as its reputation, how does that change the way we measure economic success? And maybe, more importantly, what does it even mean for an economy to be real at all?